Okay. Hi all. Again, it's a weekend over with Starfish Growth Partners, and today we have a very special person with us. We have Vineet with us. Vineet Khurana. Vineet Khurana is basically what should I say? He's on a mission for supporting startups and rural and women entrepreneurs at grassroots levels through his SACC, which is he's the CEO of the SACC Startup Accelerator Chamber of Commerce, and he has done several initiatives like incubation, mentorship, fundraising, etc. Vineet has also worked with Tycon Chandigarh and also an investor panelist with Global Entrepreneurship Network. He is a firm believer of lean startup methodology of building startups. He has built Chandigarh Angel Network from scratch while investing in startups, creating global scalable solutions for the meaningful problems. He has 14 years of industry experience, reflects building and scaling of business from ground zero. He has built a diverse portfolio consisting of more than 30 startups picked from sectors like healthcare, lifestyle, F&B, consumer retail, fintech, edtech, B2B SaaS, and social impact for the next billion-led multi-bagger exit for the investors. He's also helping several international startups missions in India. So, welcome Vineet to our channel, LinkedIn channel. I'm hopeful that people will subsequently join as we start speaking about the startup ecosystem, how it operates. You have seen it from very scratch, from the initial days, how it has grown specifically. So, would love to understand. So, my first question to you, Vineet, is from a very good corporate background, Vineet, what intrigued you to move to angel investment and angel investing? This is very interesting because a lot of entrepreneurs, even I meet, want to do angel investing, right? There are a lot of corporate guys who want to do angel investing, but at the end of the day, they get confused whether should we enter angel investing, how should we do angel investing, what is the process of doing angel investing. So can you tell your journey first of all, that how you entered into this arena and how you felt in those years doing it?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much, Sandeep, first of all, for having me on the show. We've been in talks for quite some time, and unfortunately, it took me so much time amidst my work commitments and travel. But thanks again for having me here. Glad that I finally made it on the show. Otherwise, I'm sure that you could have been knocking on my door and asking me, "कि विनीत चल तेरे घर से बैठ के करते हैं ऐसे."
That's true, Vineet, that's true.
so, so yeah, I mean, my stint with the startup ecosystem, I'd say, was an accidental one. So when I was still a student back in the days, almost 14 years ago, I was graduating at that time. Honestly, I was placed with the multinationals. I also had the dream of working with the multinationals, but then there was a time when the global recession happened. There was the time of subprime crisis. The global markets crashed, and then that eventually led to a lot of people like me, young graduates like me, not getting their joining offers or joining letters for that matter, right? So, getting into the startup ecosystem, I think, was an accidental one. I mean, I ultimately had to make a choice.
This is 2008, right? This is
This
2008.
was 2008. Yeah. So, I mean, I had to make a choice, right? I had to work anyway, and I realized that okay, this is not the end of the story. I need to build something on my own, right? So, eventually, when things happened, and the first startup didn't work. Ultimately, I sort of got an opportunity to work with a multinational, and very soon I realized that I'm not the one made for a corporate career, like a corporate kind of career, right? So this was very early in my career, in my life, that I saw that, and I observed about myself. So entrepreneurship happened to me when I needed a break in my career, like a breakthrough in my career to begin with. So eventually, after doing several attempts of failing, getting marginal success, and then eventually tasting a bit of success, for a couple of years, all this entire cycle of running and building technology businesses happened. I came back to my hometown and started building my business, and eventually, because I was very actively involved in the startup ecosystem, I was playing a pivotal role in the local startup communities. Um, I mean, with the grace of God, and I'd say with some of the well wishers intervention, I think this happened, that I got the opportunity for building the local regional angel investment network, which was Chandigarh Angels Network. So 2015 is when I started that journey, and the rest is a history. I proudly say that that breakthrough gave me the opportunity to again accidentally um, learn about startup investing, and I think that key interest of working with the startup founders, connecting with the startup founders, and um, getting intrigued with the very concept of how startup investing works, and also that itch of building something from the scratch was these were a few key components for me, for me trying my hands on angel investing and learning more about angel investing. So as I was building the portfolio for Can, I also wanted to play with my money, wanted to bet with my money, and eventually I started investing into startups myself, because I realized that okay, we were getting good opportunities, we were able to find good startups to invest in, but unless I tried my own hands on, tasting the same wine which others were tasting through me, it wouldn't really make sense otherwise, right?
Right.
So that's how it happened, and I mean, proudly I hold a couple of startups, good startups in the portfolio now, and that's how it is.
Uh, Vinny, that's very nice, amazing. I mean, mostly in 2008, basically, because when I remember my life in 2008, because at that juncture, the corporate life was not that good, and
Hmm.
even after going through that phase, most of us again went back to that phase in 2011, 12 when the markets went back. And interestingly, you actually didn't went back. You thought that there's something which I can explore. This is what specializes, the things which you thought in that kind of years. So, Vinny, there is one more thing I'm very intrigued to know that you are actually CEO of Startup Accelerator Chamber of Commerce. So, what is that all about? Basically, what they do, what is the what is the process they follow apart from the can which you have already developed, the Chandigarh Angels Network, right? So is this a group of mentors or investors, or is it a kind of ecosystem, or is it just like some startup events you do? What is basically it all about? So if you can tell us something about it.
Sure. Thank you so much for asking. So, Startup Accelerator Chamber of Commerce again came as a body which was created back in 2014, um, as um, as an enabler for the startup ecosystem, right? The local and regional startup ecosystem. The initial thought was that okay, there were a lot of startups being created based out of the region, and there were so many experienced people, well exposed here and there, every part of India and the world, who wanted to come back, do something in the region, based out of the region. But there were quite a few people, very few people, who were there to help them, support them, mentor them, and eventually help them with their growth journeys. So that is when SACC, aka Startup Accelerator Chamber of Commerce, was created by um, you know some of the local seasoned entrepreneurs. And fortunately, I became a part of it very early on. So I was associated as a mentor, as an advisor from the very beginning. And eventually, back in 2020, I realized that SACC was working well. I mean, it was doing a good job in promoting the social entrepreneurship, which essentially meant that going to the grassroots levels and uplifting the livelihood of
Yeah,
rural and women entrepreneurs.
very
So it
nice.
was happening at a good scale, and I had my key inclination. I always used to think that, okay, I keep connecting with almost all the privileged, so-called privileged entrepreneurs here and there. I've had the privilege of working with some of the most successful CEOs and the founders of the region and beyond. And obviously, I helped along the way a lot of startups in raising their funds, right? But majority of those came with um, some bit of the privilege, which either came in the form of some good background that they came with, or their own savings, or their family support, etc. But SACC, on the other hand, has been supporting the ones who come with absolutely no family backing, or the privilege of asking help from their families, taking help from their families, right? So these are essentially the ones who come from the lowest strata of our economy or our communities. Um, and so I was so touched with the fact that, okay, this is where SACC is working. This is the area where SACC is providing help, and this can be multiplied. Um, this can be taken to the altogether next level if the impact is sort of created in by getting your hands into it, getting yourself into it. That's what my thought was back in 2020. And so I fortunately got the opportunity to sort of start building SACC from where it was, and start multiplying its presence and the impact that it had already created. And fortunately, as of today, SACC, um, with all the thesis and the underlying statement of working for the rural and women entrepreneurs, currently operates 6 startup incubators in northern India, which have incubated over 180 startup entrepreneurs,
Wow, very
who have
nice.
led to the creation of more than 3,000 jobs, and then a lot of livelihood enhancement that we could do for them. So proudly, these are the entrepreneurs who are not just making their families proud, but also motivating an altogether younger generation for trying their hands on entrepreneurship, right? So that's what SACC broadly is. I mean, apart from creating value for the local and regional startup communities, it also does a lot of grassroots level work.
Very nice, Vinny. This is something very unique you are doing. Basically, it's just not about supporting the entrepreneurship, but it's also supporting the entrepreneurship where it is required. Basically, where like the social upliftment of where the especially in rural areas, right, where there is a lot of opportunity when we are talking about sustainable development. Basically, in India, these kind of things are much required and much appreciated. So we need the most important question, because I just don't want to divert from what we are discussing today. And most of I think this video will be watched by angel investors, basically. So, the most important thing whenever a angel investor or entrepreneur, especially entrepreneur, not an investor, an entrepreneur comes to me and says that, Sandeep, I want to do angel investing, right? And I'm really confused. What are the barometers I should check while checking a startup? Because even though most of the investors, sorry, entrepreneurs are connected to networks like Chandigarh Angel Network or Angel Networks are there who take care of all these aspects, but still they want to have their own portfolio, right? And they want to do their own investment, and they are pretty much confused with what are the parameters which one angel investors should check before doing an investment. So how do you look at it? What's your bird's eye view on it when you look at a
Sure,
deal
sure,
as a whole?
sure. Certainly. I think, even before that, I'd like to speak about angel investing in general, like,
Right,
somebody
right.
who is just getting
Absolutely.
started with angel investing. Because a lot of people also talk to me and they say that, okay, I also want to burn my hands with the first-hand experience of angel investing. And I always
Okay.
say that, it's not for everyone. I think, it's more of a mindset building, which takes a lot of toll on your psychological health, I'd say at times, because, it's a long-term thing. It's a long-term thing. So, I mean, it's illiquid. First of all, it's not that, if you're investing some money today, you can take it out tomorrow. It's not stock market, first of all. So it takes a lot of mindset development of risking your capital into angel investing. And I believe it's actually by far the riskiest asset class, because, it takes a lot of stars to be aligned for a startup to get successful, right? So probably 1 in 10 is going to give you some decent returns, who would sort of fill in your losses and then give you a decent IRR overall, average decent IRR, um, which makes your portfolio better than any other asset class. But just to build that portfolio of 10 or more, a multiple of 10, I'd say, it requires a lot of patience and looking into a lot of data. So, I mean, mindset is what one needs. Um, and that mindset development starts with the understanding that, you need to have that appetite of staying long enough invested into the startups that you bagged. Um, these are illiquid and you have to be okay with it. And then I think it's also understanding the risks associated with angel investing, right? A lot of founders lose the motivation for running businesses. They fight, and then the markets fall, and the startups fail overnight at times, right? So um, you can very well lose your money in angel investing, and a lot of people lose the money. Any angel investor um, ever would cannot tell you this, that okay, I've always had winners in my portfolio. There will always be losers in the portfolio as well, but it's actually the averaging, the law of averaging, that works in any asset class, right? So and again, it requires a decent time commitment as well, because you cannot just leave it to anybody else to decide. Uh, if somebody tells you, Sandeep, that okay, Sandeep, you recommend which startup I should back, I mean, you also think twice before bluntly saying that okay, you should invest your money in this startup without checking the facts, right? So you need a bit of time commitment for checking the numbers, the background, and whatever it takes, for you to build your gut feel that okay, this is the one opportunity which is worth backing. Um, and then it requires some time commitment for monitoring your portfolio from time to time, because you cannot just leave it unattended, right? You have to monitor it from time to time. Sometimes it's always good to ask your portfolio founders if they need any sort of help, and if you can provide, them some help with your own network and expertise, whatever it takes, right? So, and of course, taking a FOMO-driven approach, which is a very popular terminology, and the entire India knows it after seeing Shark Tank India. FOMO, fear of missing out. So I would now regret, after seeing so much angel investing in my career over the last 6 7 years, I regret at times that okay, I've missed on that opportunity, which could have multiplied my money by say 50x or 100x. So
Right.
there are always such stories in the portfolio in the background, right? The ones which you put back, but they always stay on the back of your mind that okay, at that time I took a decision to not go with it because of some reasons or the other. I think as this is one asset class, and angel investors and VCs have always to look at their mistakes almost every day. We commit mistakes, and that's actually very natural, right? You cannot have all the winners in your portfolio from all over. Repeating that again. So and sometimes it's like because I missed that opportunity, um, and there is a similar looking opportunity which may not be that good, but I'm ready to take risk now because I missed on that opportunity, which could potentially multiply my money, right? So there are so many relatable stories. Um, and sometimes, it's all the FOMO driven approach that the investors take, thinking that, if I don't invest in this one, maybe the next one, next good opportunity may take months and years for me to look into. And I may miss the train. So it's not that. I think so. All of that forms a mindset building, which the angel investors should definitely consider. Now, coming to your original question of what to look into the startups, or so-called the selection criteria, for backing a startup, I think I'll begin with a stellar founding team, right? So, um, and a stellar founding team is not just the founders, who graduated from the premier educational institutions, but the ones, who hold some domain expertise. And the ones, in fact, a lot of people would do very early stage angel investing just to get lower valuations, right? So they would essentially back some startups started within the campuses, you know, founded by the student founders. There is no problem with that, right? But finding one such opportunity at such an early stage requires a lot of courage. Um, I mean, backing one such opportunity requires a lot of courage. And backing such founders who do not have the domain expertise is actually a big risky proposition. Of course, it does not mean that you should not invest in the student startups, but my approach is a little different, and it's kind of very subjective for everybody. So I'd rather want to look at the founders who would have some experience in the similar domain of working somewhere here and there, and somebody who might have failed a previous startup would have some lessons to carry along and not repeat those mistakes, right? So some combinations like these, where the startup founders are experienced, who might have successful exits in the past, or may have some failed startups in the past, both are more than welcome. Somebody who comes with a decent corporate experience, which builds a domain expertise, is again a good proposition for you to look into, as a founding team. And two founders are better than one, three are better than two. So I'd say, a diverse founding team that consists of founders with complementing skill sets is actually a good proposition. So that's about the founders. Um, and then what is the value that the startup is creating, right? Is it just for the heck of creating a product or a feature which does not exist in another product, which is already existing in the market? Or is it a like a blue ocean kind of opportunity wherein, there is a lot of scope, and you've sort of thought about it from a very different perspective as founders. So that value proposition, if that is strong enough, that creates a lot of value and the opportunity for a startup to do well. Um, so, I mean, from an investment perspective, one has to avoid investing into Me Too kind of startups, right? So, if there is an Alexa kind of device already existing in the market, is somebody trying to create a new device with some added features to it, thinking that if I add a bunch of new features, then this is a sellable proposition? No, for me that is not, because it takes a lot for building an ecosystem like Alexa, and that requires a lot of capital infusion, right? So a value proposition, I mean, that was one of the examples, and there are so many other stories, that I may say, but then in view of the time limitation, I'd restrain myself from saying that. So value proposition is, one thing which definitely makes or breaks, your opportunity for investing into a startup. And then it's about, figuring out if it is a big enough market opportunity or not. Um, Sometimes, some founders would come to me, or I'm sure to you as well, telling that They are solving a problem which sounds good, a problem which looks genuine, and the solution also looks genuine, but the market opportunity is not big enough. um, I mean, if it is not big enough a market opportunity, if it is not big enough a ceiling for someone to hit, the growth will always be limited. And when you're doing some early investing, I'm sure all these projections and all will not always be accurate. But are the founders thinking big enough is what really matters, in the whole proposition. So I think ultimately, घूम फिर के बात तो वही आती है that the founders have to be good enough. They need to have good domain expertise. They need to think big enough to have a big enough vision. They need to be working on a good value proposition. Ultimately, बात तो सारी founders की ही है, because again, we need to understand that we are not investing into robots. We are investing into humans, and those humans need to have certain value system in place, that should be visible to everybody who's trying to take a bet. So I mean, these are some of the parameters, and I'm sure there are many more that we can keep speaking about, but I think these are my top 3, if I have to
I
say.
think you have rightly pointed out, Vineet. I think this is amazing. I mean, there should be a value system parameters. These are very important while analyzing any kind of a startup, right? But मेरा next question जो है वो basically बहुत difficult तो नहीं है, लेकिन this is a question which people there's always an angel investor is confused, right? And even though and a lot of people come to me asking me, Sandeep, is this the right thing? And I'm talking about valuation, right? So Vineet, if you look at it in the post pre-COVID and post-COVID, if you check how the startup ecosystem went through, right? And especially when we talk about valuation of startups. There has been a lot of changes which has come across. Or agar hum 2022, if we talk about 2022, now people are talking about like paying customers and not about how many paying customers you have. You talk about startup and we value it. They say how many paying customers you have rather than how much money you are basically burning, right? And how much growth you have. So there is a bit of a change in the this year, which I can see it. And since you have seen the phase, what do you feel? What is the right valuation? This is a very interesting question. And so I mean, I've raised this question to everybody. And since you are an investor for such a long time, what do you think? How it should be valued in current situation? I'm talking about today and how it was valued, like. Absolutely every sector has a different set of valuation standards, but what should an angel investor see while valuing a startup? What are the basic things he should,
Hmm.
as per the current situation?
So I think, Sandeep, it's not a simple question per se. I'd say it's a very difficult question, and शायद इसको भगवान भी आंसर न कर पाए. I think it's a very subjective thing when it comes to valuing a startup, right? There is no one answer to this question. क्योंकि मैं तो खुद बहुत ही ज़्यादा confused हूँ when it comes to startup valuations, and I'm sure you've also seen people arguing over valuations so much. Sometimes the founders would turn up and say that because that startup in the US was valued this much, so we should have a comparable multiple. A lot of people would come with a vanity metrics कि मेरे social media पे 100K followers है, so I should be valued at this much, right? I mean, it's actually very stupid, but then we keep hearing such analogies from here and there. So I think again it comes down to many factors, right? So if it is a revenue generating startup, a product business which has a potential to grow, I'd want to ideally, and there is no ideal world. There is no ideal situation when it comes to anything in the world, right? Leave the startup investing aside. But if I have the opportunity to pick and select, and if the founders listen to me, then I'd want to restrict a software as a service kind of startup, a good market opportunity, good set of founders, to anywhere below, 5x of their ARR, annual run rate, right?
Mhm.
And obviously that doesn't happen, right? So they would pitch you 20 to 25x, and then there are negotiations between the investors and the founders, right? For a product company, for a tangible product, say the kind of cup that I'm holding in my hands, if somebody's trying to sell the mugs here,
Mhm.
right, and a good revenue run rate, and good team in place, I'd consider giving a 3x of their annual run rate, but below
Mhm.
3x.
All right.
Um, and similarly, when it comes to some service businesses, then of course it has to be anywhere between 1.5 to 2 times of their annual run rate. That's the thumb rule, that I've seen, in the entire VC ecosystem. There are exceptions almost all the times. I mean, again, I'm saying these are the ideal figures that everyone speaks about, but
Mhm.
unfortunately, people break their own um, thesis.
Mhm.
They break their own belief system, and I've seen crazy valuations happening here and there, right?
Yes.
So it's all about things clicking, right? If it is a founder that the investors are chasing,
Mhm.
okay, uh, I mean, mind it, the founder which the investors are chasing, the multiples are crazy, always crazy. And if it is the founders chasing the investors, and the investors sort of taking a lot of time negotiating that, okay, this is not what I sort of believe in, that you should not have this much of a valuation, and the negotiation is happening repeatedly, then of course, I mean, the multiples are going to be much lower. um,
Right.
and believe it, because I've been speaking about ARR so far, to answer your question, that's the key metric, that I've sort of taken into consideration. There are many other matrices, like there are paying customers, there is repeat repeat order rates and average order value, so many things, which apply, different metrics apply to different product categories and different startups, right? So this is all of that. I think a startup which is generating traction, all it takes is some bit of negotiation between you and the founders, and it is actually about the good set of founders who are able to convince the investors that you need to invest at this value. So again, whether you're going to make money out of it or not, it all depends on if the founders are able to sell the startup, the future rounds of the startup, uh, to the other investors or the bigger VCs, etc. Right? I think a good set of founders may make a bad idea work.
Mhm.
Again, repeating this thing that the founders, matter the most in the whole value proposition.
Mhm. Very, very interesting, Vineet. And since you have seen the market for so long, you know it very well. Vineet, there's one more thing which I would love to ask you, because see, the government is doing a lot of work on startups right now, and there's a scheme called Seed Fund Scheme, which I think was launched in 2013-14, and a lot of
Yeah.
startups have started getting the seed fund from them, from incubators, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you think of about the policy, first of all, like overall startup policy? First of all, what GOI is following right now, and what is your comment on it? And second part of the question is the fact that we have like Atal incubation centers, we have like in government approved incubators. So, what is their role basically, in developing the startup ecosystem? And do you
Sure.
think there's
Sure.
still a lacuna in it that we can develop further in the policy, specifically when we are talking about the startups?
Certainly. So I'll take up the second one first. And I think getting started, doing a startup is a difficult journey. It's the path less traveled. So getting started is the toughest part. And that's where I think the role of incubators is very critical, right? So in our times, when I started my first business, startup was not even a buzzword back then, right? So there were hardly any people saying कि भाई startup कर लो या startup करनी चाहिए. There were hardly any. But I mean, the kind of buzz that we are seeing in the startup ecosystem now, or the ecosystem, business ecosystem in general, I think it's good and bad both. But I'll focus on the good part. The good part is that a lot of people are deciding to start their ventures, and that's good for the economy, overall economy of the country as well. And hence you see a lot of push by the government. It's actually a thing which goes hand in hand, right? It's a chicken and egg problem. कि opportunities आप create करोगे entrepreneurs के लिए, तो ज़्यादा entrepreneur create होंगे, या ज़्यादा entrepreneurs create होंगे तो आप उनके लिए और उतनी ही opportunities create करते जाओगे. So I think it's a good push by the government. All these AICs, ACICs, and all the state funded or center funded incubators are definitely adding to the overall value which is being created for the startups, for the determined ones who are willing to do startups. And I think this is all leading us to a very interesting time, So I don't really believe in the fact कि चलो इतने startup आपके 50,000 startup हो गए या 60,000 हो गए या 70,000 हो गए. These are all vanity metrics. But then eventually, is it really about solving those localized problems, which should have been solved, say, 10 years ago, but fortunately now being looked into by the entrepreneurs, in all parts of India. So definitely from that standpoint, it creates a lot of value for us as the citizens and the residents of this one big nation, right? And the overall employment problem can only be solved by the startups. This is very evident. So the incubators are definitely doing a good push, for encouraging people to do their startups, and the ones who have started, they're showing them the right path. So that is there. At the same time, the government has several more initiatives, for access to capital. As you rightly said, Startup India Seed Fund scheme is one of the things. There is PMEGP scheme, which also gives you the access to capital, to micro loans kind of stuff, right? So, and subsidized mudra loans and so on and so forth. So, I mean, what used to take a long cycle earlier, like 5 years ago, does not take that long, of course. It's not a 56-minute process. It is not. Of course, it's, what's claimed otherwise, that, you can get a loan under 1 hour, under 60 minutes. It's not the case. The banks take their own due diligence course to decide. It's a long cycle, of course, but then there is at least access to capital. So if somebody is not getting interest from angel investors per se, can always get access to the government grants, or all these kind of loans, subsidized loans, or say a Startup India Seed Fund scheme, and several other things, which are pushed by the government. I think there is not just policy discussions in today's times. There is also a good level of execution. So the government has made a good number of departments here and there, right? Which do good monitoring of the activities which are going on. So this is not just the money which is dumped into the startup ecosystem, and it's not that nobody is answerable to anyone, how the money was spent, but the way they are monitoring it all is also very encouraging, I'd say, because I sort of get the opportunity to look at it now more closely. When we are pushing this rural and women entrepreneurship through SACC, we get to see at the grassroots levels the kind of work which is going on. So I'm sort of happy with what is going on. I'm sure 5 pictures look different from it.
Right, Vineet. It is very, and I think we have covered it all, most of it. But just one last question to you, because because I'm seeing, watching the triple IIT in Hyderabad, IITs, NIITs, all of the young entrepreneurs, And to be very open to you, if you talk to most of them, they want to become entrepreneurs, and they are all, apart from looking for a corporate job, are also looking to make a product or something, or to be in entrepreneurship in coming years. Also, there are funds like Campus Fund, which are basically helping the young entrepreneurs at a very school, college level, right? So I just want to just a few advices to these young entrepreneurs, Vineet, because they are just looking at you and just they're thinking that how we can basically move forward, because they are at a very nascent stage. Apart from that, what do you think young entrepreneurs should do basic reading? I mean, books or some kind of videos or whatever, which is required basically at a very initial level so that they can understand entrepreneurship.
Sure, sure. And I think a very valid question that you've asked. So second part again of your question first. मुझे ऐसा लगता है किताबें वगैरह पढ़ना, बुक्स पढ़ना अच्छी बात है, but I think you always learn by doing. And
Right.
entrepreneurship is one thing. The more you sort of read the books and get into the motivational stuff, I think it somehow leads you to analysis paralysis, which is like, analyzing, over analyzing yourself, and then after all the motivation, if you're not taking enough action, there is no point, right? So I think the biggest motivation you can, and it applies to everything that you do in life, right? Why
Mhm.
go to gym every day? Why follow a fitness regime every day?
Mhm.
Ultimately, it all starts somewhere. Before you start seeing the results, it has to get started somewhere. So, I mean, even if it does not take, uh, even if you do not see much much action on ground, much results above the surface, you should still keep trying until you see that ray of hope. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. So you have to keep digging your tunnel until you see the light. And I think more than reading any sort of book, you can only learn by doing it, right? So first thing first, I think do not get into analysis paralysis. If you overanalyze,
Mhm.
you'll always keep analyzing and you won't take action. So I think
Mhm.
all the young entrepreneurs who are listening to me right now, the ones
Mhm.
who are in their teens or in their 20s, I think the biggest thing that you can do right now is take action.
Mhm.
And the best part about you guys is that you guys can think of straight off jumping off the cliff, right?
Mhm.
Without thinking much. But if
Mhm.
you if you if you start thinking like me and Sandeep, who are getting older, thinking the pluses and minuses, or thinking that we have so and so liabilities,
Mhm.
then all your actions will be delayed. So the young ones, should always take the approach of taking faster actions, and trying and failing very early. Failing fast is very important when it comes to entrepreneurship. If you're married to your idea, if you just keep thinking that this is the best ever thing and I won't give up, until I make it work, even
Mhm.
if nobody's there to buy what you're building, right? It may sometimes not work in your favor. I think most of the times it may not work in your favor. I'm not saying that you should not be persistent enough. Of course, you have to be persistent enough. But I think sometimes, in order to reach your goal, you may have to change your plan. So you have to fail faster, in proving whether what you're thinking, all the assumptions that you made, for building a startup are actually true or not. And it will only happen when you go out, meet your customers, and validate it very early, even before you start building a full-fledged kind of product, right? So if you're technical enough, if you know what to build, how to build yourself good enough, you can save on tons of money. But then don't start building the best ever product, because best and ideal are the most abused words ever. And you
Mhm.
should not chase that perfection, that you've been reading in all the motivational content that you're seeing. So I think
Mhm.
getting started is very important, more than when to get started or why to get started. I think it's getting started is very important. So वो आप शुरू करो, and
Mhm.
then take the action. I think That's the most important part. Another input would be to not approach investors, to not treat them as gods, to not
Mhm.
chase them unnecessarily until
Mhm.
you have proven all your assumptions and you have a few paying initial customers and you've done your validations well enough, because all these questions are going to get thrown on you, on your face, that what have you come up with? Is it just the idea, or something more tangible, that you could prove with your customers? So just validate enough before going to any sort of angel investor or anybody that you seek feedback from or money from, especially. Um, and what else? I think one thing that I've seen most of the young entrepreneurs coming to me and telling me is that if you or any other investor is not paying attention, or is not actually interested to give me money, then my idea is not good enough. No, the simple answer to that is no. That's not true.
Mhm.
If you're able to create good business out of the idea that you've generated, if you're able to get hold of good paying customers, if you're able to generate sustainable income from your business, it is a good business, right?
Right.
It Every time you cannot just wait for somebody else's validation, uh, that this is there is some investor telling you that this is a good thing and you should keep working on it, does not mean that he's always right or wrong. So you need to have that true instinct within yourself for making a business work, uh, more than anybody else telling you whether it's worth doing or not. So that's the general piece of advice that I can give to anybody.
Thank you, Vineet. It's very interesting and I mean full of knowledge. And thanks for giving your time, especially talking about angel investing and advice to angel investors, talking about the ecosystem, plus such nice advices to the young entrepreneurs. I'm sure that they might watch this whole episode and interview of yours and will get a lot of nuances how an angel investing should be done. Thank you, Vineet. Thanks for your time. I hope I didn't wasted your weekend.
Yeah, not at all, not
But
at all,
I
Sandeep.
had to be very open to you. Sitting beside you, I was like speechless. I was listening to you. It was such an interesting conversation and a lot of knowledge and experience coming, especially from your side. So thank you, Vineet. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, for the opportunity, and happy weekend to everybody.
Happy weekend.
Thank you.